be patient for, right? There's a verse in the Bible, Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 through 23, that talk about these fruits of the Spirit. It describes them as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. And most of those fruits, we say, those are good things. Those are things that I want. I want love. None of us look and say, I don't want any love in my life. We say, I like love. I like joy. I like these, but patience is a hard one, because patience, none of us say, I would love to be more patient, because here's why, because then you have more opportunity to be patient. And who of us likes to really wait, right? You figure out how impatient you are when you sit in traffic and somebody doesn't go and the light turns green. Patience. A few years ago, I learned a lot about patience. I was in a foreign country. Anybody ever spent time in a foreign country? Okay, if you go in foreign countries, some countries just have a different concept of time and patience. I was in the Middle East, and I had made some friends there, and these guys that I had become friends with invited me to go play football, which is soccer for us. And so I was going to go play football, soccer, and they said, we're going to come pick you up at 5 o'clock. And so me and my American mindset, I thought, okay, I need to be ready at 4:30. And so I did. I got ready, and I got like my football equipment together, which is clothes. Sitting at my porch in the apartment that I was living in at 4:30 and thinking, okay, well, they'll show up sometime right here in this time. And 4:30 came and went, and 5 o'clock came, and I was like, okay, they're going to be here, and then it went. And then 5:30 came and it went, and I started thinking, am I getting left out of football today? I started looking at my watch. About 5:45, I didn't want to be rude, but at 5:45, I decided, okay, I need to call these guys and find out what's going on. So I call them up and I say, hey, are we still playing football today? I just like saying that now. We still playing today? And you're like, yeah, we'll be there soon. Okay, soon. 6 o'clock rolls by. Nope, nobody's there yet. 6:30 rolls by, an hour and a half after they told me. And they pull up. They're like, you ready to go? Yeah. Been ready. 2 hours now. Just hopping. They don't mention anything about being late. And I was like, wait, how do you not mention that you're an hour and a half late? I was expecting you a long time ago. And then I realized as I spent more time in this culture that they weren't late. They weren't late, not in their culture. When they said 5 o'clock just generally meant kind of 5 to 7, somewhere in this time frame, because here's what they did in their culture. It was never about just getting to the next event. It was about doing and enjoying the event that you were doing to its fullest until you went on to the next one. And so time was just kind of this relative concept, which was hard for me because as an American, I thought, but it needs to be structured. It needs to be exact. I want to know exactly when things are going to happen. I want to know the schedule. I learned a lot about patience during that time. That patience was about enjoying what you're doing, not always looking forward to just what comes next. There's a beauty in patience, celebrating each moment. This year, we have been in a series called Connect the Dots. In January, we started in Genesis, and we've worked through the whole Bible, and now we're getting to the very end of the Bible here at the end of December. And we've been describing how the Bible fits together to tell one story. And we said the main character of that story is Jesus. And we've seen how we fit into that story, how we connect into that story. And here's what we're getting ready to do. We're getting ready to finish up the Bible. And here's how the Bible ends. It says Jesus is going to come back. He's going to come back. And not only does the Bible say, Jesus himself said, I'm going to return, I'm going to take you with me. And so now we're left in this holding pattern. And when he left, he said this. He said, okay, but as I'm going, I'm going to give you a mission. If you're a follower of Jesus, your job is to now go and tell other people about me, baptize them, teach them everything I've taught you. And so we've said, okay, we embrace that mission. But eventually we start to wonder, okay, what about this idea that Jesus is coming back? If you look at your clock, if you look at your calendar, you realize it's been almost 2,000 years. And so some of us start to think, okay, Jesus, I know you were leaving for a little while, but what is the schedule? When's this happening? Are you really coming back? See, as we look toward the end, we start to have these looming questions. And our goal today is to look at the end of time and to celebrate patience. Celebrate patience. And to answer some practical questions about what is happening with Jesus coming back. If you have a Bible, I'm going to invite you to open up to 2 Peter chapter 3. 2 Peter chapter 3. We're going to read Peter as he's addressing some questions about Jesus' return. If you don't have a Bible, that's just fine. You can follow along with me on the screens here. As we're going to read just the first 8 verses of 2 Peter chapter 3. Here's what it says. Dear friends, this is now my second letter to you. I've written both of them as reminders to stimulate you to wholesome thinking. I want you to recall the words spoken in the past by the holy prophets and the command given by our Lord and Savior through your apostles. Above all, you must understand that in the last days, scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, where is this coming? He promised. Ever since our ancestors died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. But they deliberately forget that long ago, by God's word, the heavens came into being, and the earth was formed out of water by water. By these waters also the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. By the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. But do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. Let's stop there. What are the questions? What are the questions that we examine as we consider, as we wait for the end of the world? The writer here, his name is Peter. Peter is a disciple, a follower of Jesus. He's one of these guys who went around with Jesus for about 3 years, and he saw Jesus do some incredible work. He saw the miracles of Jesus. Peter heard God speak from heaven about Jesus. Peter saw the risen Jesus who had come back from the dead. I simply say that Peter was convinced that Jesus was real, and he had also heard Jesus say this, I'm coming back. And already during Peter's lifetime, he recognizes that there is an issue with Jesus coming back, and it is that people are going to start questioning is this really going to happen? Is Jesus really going to come back? Peter says, I'm writing you to stimulate you to wholesome thinking. He says, I want your mind to get engaged with what I'm saying here. And he makes this reference to the end times. If you were here last week, we said generically this concept of the end times is everything between Jesus going back to heaven from his first time here on earth and when he's going to come back. And there's this general concept of the end times. We are in the end times. And Peter says, as the end times, as they go on, we're going to develop more and more what he calls scoffers. People who begin to question. Now, I assume that I don't have to convince you that there are many what we would call scoffers, or people who question whether or not God is real, whether or not Jesus is actually going to come back, whether or not Jesus came in the first place. Many scoffers in our world. He says there will be people who will distract from this, and their topic of interest, their question, is Jesus going to come back? And they point to the history of the world. They say, look, if we look at the history of the world, things have always continued just the same. People come and they die, and people come and they die. And they say, what's really changed? What's really different? How do we know that Jesus, this guy who lived now 2,000 years ago, how do we know he's really going to come back? See, as we look at what Peter has to say, we start to answer this first question. Is there really an end? And we're going to see this. God has already shown his control. So trust that his plan has an ending. If we want to answer the question, is there an end? Is this all going to actually end one day? We can see that God has already shown his control over everything. He says the scoffers, they're going to point to this concept that everything has just continued on. And Peter's response is, that's exactly right. He said, you want to know why everything has continued on? He said in the very beginning, God already described this. God created everything. God made everything. He made the heavens and the earth. He made all of it. And he said all of this has continued because God has allowed it to continue. God has shown his control over all things. And he points to this time. He says there was actually a time where God shows that he can actually end all things too. There was this story that we looked at early in the year where God calls this flood that almost completely wiped out all of humanity. He says, look, God has shown that not only is he sustaining all things, but he has the ability to end all things. So he says, as we go through life, we need to understand that God has always been in control. He's always shown that he's going to be in control. And so the idea that he has an end for all of this should not come shockingly. So there's a relief. God has a plan for the ending. What is his plan for the ending? We read on and we see this description of how he describes the ending. Did you catch it? I sure did. Oh, we're reading. He's like, Jesus is coming back. Here's what's going to happen. Here's some words he used. Destruction, judgment, fire. I don't know about you, but if I had a friend coming over and they're like, yeah, when I get there, destruction, judgment, fire. I'd be like, you know what? Let's not hang out tonight. Let's destruction, judgment, fire. That doesn't sound too happy, but here's why this is good. Because he doesn't just say destruction, judgment, fire. He says that in the end, bad will be destroyed and only good will remain. That God's final plan is to destroy bad so that only good will remain. Now, we're going to talk about what that means in a moment. But when he says that, he leaves us this promise that the end, the coming of Jesus, is not the end of all things. What we are waiting on is the next event, something that will continue on, not the stoppage of all things, something better. I like kids' books, mostly because they're a lot easier to read than adult books. This is the Very Hungry Caterpillar. Anybody know this book? Yes, it's one of my favorite books. This is my daughter's, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. It's all about this caterpillar who starts as a little egg laying on a leaf, and then he comes out of that egg. Here, I'll show you the pictures. Comes out of the egg, and it says he gets hungry, and so he starts to look for some food. On Monday, he eats an apple. On Tuesday, he eats 2 pears, and so on and so forth, until he eventually goes through this day where he eats chocolate cake and ice cream and a pickle and cheese and salami and a lollipop and cherry pie and sausage and a muffin and watermelon. Sounds like Golden Corral right there. And then, right here at the end of the book, he goes into this little cocoon. And what happens on the next page? Go ahead, ruin the story for your neighbor. He becomes a butterfly. That's how the story ends. You know the cool thing about the ending of the story? It's not the ending of the story. The whole point of this story, the way this book ends, is it's saying something better comes now. And we don't have a full description of exactly what that better looks like. We just know that in the end, something changes and it's all better and a new story begins. That is the story of the Bible. In the end, something changes, and it doesn't just stop. Something better begins. And we don't have all the description about how the better continues. We just know that it continues. We know there is something better, something to look forward to, that all of this becomes something else. So our question that we begin to ask ourselves is, can we be patient as we wait for what's next? Can we trust God that he has a plan for what's next, because he has shown his control over all things? And so even when we don't understand it, even when we're going through tough days, even when it feels like we're stuck in a little cocoon, we know that there is something better to come. He's made that promise. Is there really an ending? And I'm just going to tell you, certainly yes. I believe it 100%. Why hasn't it happened yet? Then let's keep reading. Pick up at verse 9 with me. Verse 9 says this: The Lord is not slow in keeping his promises, as some understand slowness. Instead, he is what? Patient. Instead, he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything done in it will be laid bare. Let's stop there. Just a moment ago, we said bad will be destroyed and only good will remain. That sounds nice, right? That is an encouraging thought. There will be a day when bad will be destroyed, only good will remain, and we think in our minds, I'd like to be there. Until we run into a problem, We realize, wait, I've done things that are bad. And so if bad is destroyed, there are parts of me that are bad. And I would like to be on the not destroyed part. This doesn't bode well for us, but thanks to God that we have heard the rest of the story. See, here's the rest of the story. It said that Jesus came with a purpose. That Jesus, the first time he came to do something. He came to destroy sin. And so we've heard this story now that Jesus came so that when he died, he created an opportunity so that you and I can ask him to take on our sin, to be forgiven in him, so that when this day comes, we're not destroyed. We use this word, saved, salvation. Question is, what are we saved from? Have you ever thought about that? What are you actually saved from? That's what you're saved from. Fire, death, destruction. That's not a happy topic. But the reality is that is what we're saved from. There will be a day when bad will be destroyed and only good will remain. So because of what Jesus has done, this story of Jesus takes on a greater meaning because it means that's what we can be saved from. We're not just saved from being like morally worse people so that we can be slightly morally better people. We are saved from being destroyed with everything bad when only good will remain. And we have a concern. We have a concern then that we would say, okay, but if judgment happens one day, and I know that there are people who don't believe in Jesus, who reject Jesus, who want nothing to do with Jesus. Maybe you're in this room and you say, I'm one of those people. So when we start to answer this question, why hasn't it happened yet? Here's the answer to that question. Because God is not done saving people. So he is patient for your sake. God is not done saving people. We read what Peter has to say here, and he says, if you want to know why it hasn't happened yet, we ask this question, Jesus, why haven't you come back? Jesus, why haven't you come back? I'm going to tell you, I hear plenty of Christians will say this, Jesus, are you going to come back already? The world seems pretty rough. Here's why he hasn't come back, because he's not done saving people. It is because God is patient with us that he has not come back. So all of a sudden, patience takes on a new meaning. He is patiently offering forgiveness to people still. And it is a beautiful picture where it says, God desires that no one would perish. See, we need to understand that as we talk about this destruction of all things, it says here very clearly, God's desire is that nobody would be destroyed. It's the very character of God that everyone would experience forgiveness if they would just let him. This character of God has not been hidden. I said we've been looking at the whole Bible this year, Genesis all the way to soon we'll be in Revelation. We've been looking at all of it, and we've seen this character of God. The Bible describes God as compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in love. Compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. Where does it describe God as that? Exodus 34:6, Nehemiah 9:17, Psalm 86:15, Psalm 103:8, Psalm 145:8, Joel 2:13, Jonah 4:2. My point is this: God really wanted us to know, I am slow to anger and abounding in love. I'm compassionate and gracious. And I'm going to repeatedly tell you that about myself, because the way this is going to end, it sounds rough, but I want you to understand, I'm going to do everything I can to see that all people would come to salvation. It is an act of compassion that God has not ended the world yet. And the same people mocking him, the same people saying, hey, your God's not coming back, this is a fairy tale, those are the same people that God is being patient with. I remember when I was in school, if I'd forget to do my homework, I loved teachers who were late to class. College, I'd have professors who would be late to class, and that was my opportunity. They weren't there yet. I could finish my homework. I was like, okay, come on. Just get it done. Like, I celebrated when I felt like they were late. I'm going to tell you, I don't know when Jesus is coming back. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that, like, oh, here's the reason Jesus is going to come back this year. Like, no, nobody knows that. If you find a pastor who tells you that, like, just go somewhere else, okay? Nobody knows. We don't have a clue. We just know that he's promising to come back at some point. But here's the reality. Until he comes back, we can be like that kid trying to get your homework done, saying, I want to do everything in my ability to continue this work until he comes, because he's not here yet. He is slow to anger, abounding in love. His compassion is his patience. We still have time to be part of the work here. See, now we realize we're not the patient ones waiting on God. God is the patient one waiting on us. Then that fruit of the Spirit changes. Patience. Be patient. All of a sudden, I like this idea of patience. I like this idea of enjoying this moment that I am in right now. Because if I am not a believer, that I have still opportunity to come to salvation through Christ. And if I am a believer, I still have opportunity to share that truth with others. Why hasn't it happened yet? Because God is not done saving people. He's patient for your sake. Let's keep reading. Pick up in verse 11 with me. Since everything will be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you be? You ought to live holy lives and godly lives as you look forward to the day of God and speed its coming. That day will bring about the destruction of the heavens by fire, and the elements will melt in the heat. But in keeping with his promises, we are looking forward to a new heaven and a new earth where righteousness dwells. So then, dear friends, since you are looking forward to this, make every effort to be found what? Spotless, blameless, and at peace with God. Bear in mind that our Lord's patience means salvation. Just as our dear brother Paul also wrote you in the wisdom that God gave him. Let's stop there. We've answered the question, is there really an end? We've answered the question, why hasn't it happened yet? Here's our last question. What should you do while you're waiting? And here's our answer. We live in a way that you are always prepared for his return. Live in a way that you are always prepared for his return. Peter says we know it will end. We know why God is waiting. So in the meantime, here's what you do. Live holy lives. And he uses this description: spotless, blameless, and at peace with God. Those are lofty goals. I want you to imagine somebody tells you this: hey, I need you to clean your house, and it needs to be spotless. All of a sudden, in your mind, you're thinking through, what would I have to do to clean my house for it to be truly spotless? You're thinking about the dirt that's been shoved in behind the baseboards, or if you've ever tried to clean grout in tile, you're like, it just can't be done. It never cleans. What would you have to do to actually clean your house where it was spotless? You have to rip it down, build a new one. If you've lived in your house that is not spotless, it will never be spotless. And so we hear this description and we think, how am I practically supposed to do that? How can I live spotless, blameless, and always at peace with God? Because I practically have some dirty spots. Here's how we pursue holiness: through Christ. That it is he who makes us spotless. That is the only thing that can make us spotless. He described it in verse 15. He said, God's patience means salvation. That is the only thing that can make us spotless. God is not patient for you to fix yourself. God is patient for you to come to him. For you to depend on him, for you to turn it over to him. And when we do that, because I realize in this room, the average person in this room would probably say, I've done that. I've turned my life over to him. I'm a believer. I'm a follower of Jesus. Here's what that means for you. You have the freedom to pursue holiness in your life. Freedom to pursue holiness. Because when you pursue it through Christ, even when you fail, he is what made you holy. So what is the picture here? What does it look like while we wait on God? We use that term waiting. What do we get a picture of? You get a picture of you sitting somewhere. They have rooms for this, waiting rooms, right? I went to the dentist the other day. I went to a waiting room until I could go into the dentist. What do they have in waiting rooms? They have magazines. I never read magazines, but yet when I'm waiting in a waiting room, I picked up a yacht magazine. I've never looked at a yacht magazine in my life, and I thought, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. Read about yachts, because this is my selection. Yachts or glamour. And yachts won out. Is that the picture of what it means to wait on God? Absolutely not. Here's the picture that is given. It is like mountain climbing. And you have a rope. And you have the freedom to climb, knowing that that rope is what saves you. Knowing that even when you fall, even when you fail, that is your salvation. See, climbing with a rope doesn't make you want to fall. It just gives you the freedom to know that when you fall, you will be caught. It saves you when you fall. Our freedom is not to sin abundantly. Our freedom is to pursue holiness, knowing that when we sin, when we mess up, Jesus has already forgiven. Jesus saves. And because of that, I can live a life where I can be confident in saying that I will seek to be spotless and blameless and at peace with God because of the grace of Jesus. Because of that, I have the freedom to read my Bible and pursue God. I have the freedom to open up with others and to share my life with others. I have the freedom to fight sin in my life. I have the freedom to mature as a believer in Jesus. I have the freedom to pray. I have the freedom to tell other people about Jesus. I have freedom that when I'm doing all those things, when I mess up, not if I mess up, when I mess up, that I'm already forgiven. What if we all became active waiters? Not just sitting around thinking, Jesus, when are you coming back? What if we said, you know what, I know there's something next, and I know it's better. There's a completion of all things. I trust that. But I know why you're waiting, God. And so I want to be a part of what you're doing here. And ask Tim and the praise team to come up one last time. As they make their way up here, I just want to ask you, what difference does it make if Jesus comes back? Here's the difference. When he comes back, it's a reminder that he has fulfilled his promises. And he will. We can trust that he will come back. And until then, what do you do with it? If you're not a believer, you thank him for the patience that he has had. And you look to figure out what salvation is, to experience it for yourself. And if you are a believer, you say, God, thank you. Thank you that you haven't shown up yet. Let me use my life. While I know that there is something greater in store for me, let me use my life now to pursue holiness. That when you come back, that I'll be ready. That you won't come back and I'll think, oh, I wish I had done this. I should have done this. I should have taken the opportunity while I had the chance. Oh, that we would be the people that would be ready, that we would be a church that would be ready to say, you know what, no matter what happens every single day of my life, I'm going to live knowing that each day is a gift from God. That he is patient, that he has not come back yet. As we sing, I want to remind you that in the seat in front of you, if you have something you want to talk about that you're just like, hey, I'm not going to talk about this with somebody right now, just grab one of these cards in front of you. This is a way just to share. If you're visiting with us, this is a way for us to connect with you, to put a name and a face together. We have a gift that we want to give you later on as you make your way out. If you're a member here, whoever you are here, if you have a prayer request, if you have something you want to talk about, if you fill this out, there's going to be a group of people who are going to pray over these. Or maybe you'd say, you know what, I want to talk to somebody right now. There's something that I need somebody to pray with me. I need somebody to talk with me. As we sing this next song, Pastor Buddy is going to be hanging out right here on the front, and you can come and talk with him, pull him aside after the service. I'm going to be hanging out in the back, and if you hang out with me for a little while, then we'll sit down and we'll talk. And there are so many people around you who are willing to sit down and talk. You simply be obedient to